This week in Fizzics TWIST.
The patriarchy escapes its terrestrial home and enters the International Space Station.
How your brain invents sounds that aren't there.
And how hatred of dubstep has expanded into the insect world.
G'day, Ben.
G'day, Duncan.
You're not Quill.
No, I'm not Quill. Quill's off hiding away in a little hole being sick.
Being sick, I think she might have the same illness that I had.
Ooh.
Recently, yes.
Interesting. It's, a bit of an issue with pathogens somewhat in the Fizzics household.
Exactly, yeah. It's all floating around, airborne diseases or something. Yeah. But that's all right because you are a special guest today, which is nice. And I think we've got a couple of good stories, actually.
No, I'm really looking forward to this. It's been a lot of fun listening to the Twist episodes, and hey, more to come.
Yeah, absolutely. So the first thing that I wanted to talk about was one thing that we actually touched on, I think it was last episode, when we very excitedly announced that there was going to be an all-female spacewalk. Which is supposed to happen on March 29 is when they said they were going to do it. And, we quoted from one of those astronauts that she posted on Twitter, which apparently she can do from space. Amazing. And she was like really, really excited to do it. Lo and behold, didn't happen.
Yeah,
did not happen.
And it set the internet aflurry.
Absolutely on fire. And you can understand why, because when I first saw it, I was like, well, this is ridiculous. How could they not? This is just the patriarchy gone mad, you know.
and of course, we're talking here as two guys, of course. So it makes it just as bad.
Yes, exactly. But, we'll do our best to explore this topic. But yeah, the idea was that there was going to be an all-female team doing spacewalk. So that means that the actual astronauts were women, as well as the people manning the controls and all that sort of stuff. It was supposed to be all women, which is the first time it's actually happened.
And it's not as if they came up with it overnight. I mean, these people train for years to do these things.
Yeah. And the other thing was that it wasn't actually, according to the spokeswoman who was talking about this, Stephanie Shearholtz is her name, she basically said it wasn't actually orchestrated to be that way. It was actually more of... there was an element of chance. It just said, these are the people who are available, these are the people who are on the International Space Station, so they're going to do the spacewalk. It just so happened that they're all women. But then, didn't go to plan.
So it's kind of like you got your football team, you know exactly who's going to play, but then something changes and you got to make something up, and now you haven't got the equipment.
Yes, that's exactly what happened
right
here. Exactly what happened here. So, when they announced that this was going to be happening, they were, quite forward in saying, look, this could change. Plans change all the time, schedules change all the time, if it, is deemed to be necessary. But then what they discovered was that one of the astronauts decided that her suit didn't fit anymore. So she had actually trained. They have multiple sizes of spacesuits, and she trained. And they actually have different sort of components, if you can call them that. It's not just like a big spacesuit. There's actually arm components, and there's leg components, and there's torso components. And she had trained with the large torso and the medium torso. And she was like, yep, I'm good to go with either one. But then, on I think it was March 22, she discovered that she was best in a medium and not a large. The medium was not available.
And it's not like you exactly FedEx it up top, though.
Exactly.
Yeah, I mean,
wouldn't that be amazing?
And it's kind of tough too, because you're trying to predict these things. I mean, they go up into the atmosphere, and your spine stretches. Everything changes.
Everything changes. Yeah, there's so many different variables in this kind of thing. And she basically went, look, I don't feel comfortable working, in this particular torso component, so I'm just going to bow out. So it was actually, as it turns out, it was kind of her choice to not do it.
And importantly, it's not like she's looking after a $100 piece of gear. I mean,
no, this is millions of dollars.
Yeah.
I mean, NASA describes them as personal spacecraft, right?
Well, they are.
They are, absolutely. And they're, like I said, a sort of mix and match of different components that come in multiple sizes to make sure that they're actually, they fit as best as possible. But if you don't have that medium torso, then you don't feel comfortable working in that environment. And she was like, no, I'm not going to do it. So the actual medium that was available was done by one of the other female astronauts. So that went fine. But the thing is, there was another medium available on the space station, but you can't just swap it in. It's not like putting on a new phone case. Not that simple. Because they have to do a lot of testing to actually make sure that this, is screwed together properly. Because if you get a leak, you're screwed, basically.
Yes. Screwed from not screwing properly.
Exactly.
Got it.
And, because you're going out into a very, very harsh environment, you want to make sure that everything is working in its tip-top condition. And they just weren't comfortable in doing that. So she got replaced by some guy who is probably the most hated man in space at the moment.
Right now.
Yeah. His name was Nick Hague. And so they'd worked together previously. He's already started doing battery upgrades and all that sort of stuff. So he's probably not in a great place in the minds of the people right now. But apparently everything went well. I've seen some photos from that actual mission, and it looked like it went well. So, yeah.
I guess it's probably the issue is that, when the tweets go out, whatnot, you've got 140-odd characters for things to go out. And the issue is you'll take your side or your opinion. If you don't do any more research than that, and off goes, you get this echo chamber of just, rah!
Yeah. And it's like the same kind of thing happens when people read headlines and not the article, and they miss all of the nuances that are included in that.
So it's a bit of a PR thing for NASA right now.
Oh, big time. Yeah. But, they've got great PR. So I think they've done a fairly good job of kind of questioning, that's not the right word, like mediating all of this news. But when it first came out, everyone just freaked out. It's like, the patriarchy's in space.
Admittedly, I looked at it and went, whoa. And then, I was actually presenting at a recent conference about Destination Moon, which is the upcoming National Science Week theme. And that was just a topic that naturally came up.
Did it really?
Yeah, it did. People from the floor were just asking about it. And frankly, I hadn't read into it properly. I said, look, I'm not going to make an opinion quite yet because I haven't read this yet.
Not the person to do it.
And then, no, I'm not the person to make the judgment, especially because, hey, I'm not NASA and I don't know what's going on.
Yeah. So you didn't do the thing of a phrase that I heard recently, which is something like having the confidence of a mediocre man, something like that, because you could have just made it up on the spot.
I could have totally done
Not that you're mediocre at all.
I could have Dunning-Krugered it totally.
That's how I live my life.
That's it. And maybe you shouldn't live yours that way if you're listening on it.
Yeah, exactly.
That's cool.
So, yeah, I just thought I'd bring that up because, we were very excited about that to happen. Myself and Quill were very, very excited. And we talked about it very briefly. And then when it didn't happen, I didn't read the article. I read the headline and I freaked out. But it turns out there are actually genuine reasons behind this, and NASA had already planned for it and all that sort of stuff. So we do have to be a little bit more careful before jumping to conclusions about this sort of thing.
True, and it's an inevitable thing that it's going to go ahead at some point anyway.
Yeah, well, it had to. It's a battery. If they didn't do the battery replacement, then the space station would be in a pretty bad place.
It'll get cold, then hot, then cold, then hot multiple times a day.
Exactly.
Got it.
The variability in temperature is something like hundreds of degrees, I think.
Oh, it's spectacular.
Yeah.
It's amazing of just how that structure can actually handle the stresses for getting
it would expand
and then contract.
Yeah.
It's like, is it 12 times a day or something like that? Sorry, if you're out there, just correct me. I just off the top of my head, it's something like that. They're going around a great rate of knots.
Yeah, absolutely. And the other thing is that it has to be the temperature has to be regulated inside as well, which is insane to think about, because it's obviously not just the expansion and contraction, but the heat of the sun that would heat up the inside. But they managed to do a pretty good job of regulating it.
Quite an impressive air conditioning contract to try and work out with the engineering with that.
Yeah, it's really wild to think about. And how on earth, that's not the right phrase, how on earth, but how do they install thermal regulation that works that well?
Yeah, it seems to me something that we could easily get into a whole bunch of ways. The thing is, people do a lot of work on tiniest of tiniest components, let alone a major system, like life support. I hear it's important.
Yeah, exactly. It is pretty important. Shall we move on?
Why not?
All right, beautiful. Now, this one is a story that you brought to me that I don't know anything about yet, so I just want to let you run with it.
And to be honest, I only found out about this morning. I was having a look through all these different things because, hey, I knew I was coming on the Twist podcast. Mm-hmm. And I went, one of the things that got me thinking, and thinking about previous episodes that you and Quill have done, is that you've been really into sounds.
Yes.
Totally so. And there's been one that I went, really? You may have heard about this. It's literally your brain can hear silent GIFs. Now, I'm going to go down a rabbit hole. Is it GIFs or GIFs, by the way?
This is an interesting one because apparently the person who invented it or the organization who invented it have declared that it's pronounced GIF, but then the entire internet just went, no, it's not. It's clearly GIF because GIF stands for Graphics Interchange Format, and graphics is a hard G.
Yeah, right.
So it should be GIF. if, right?
Yep.
So I'm going to go with GIF, with
And
the wisdom of the internet.
And when I think of GIF, I think of like the floor cleaner, like the cleaner
Jiffy or something
the GIF.
like that?
No, GIF for real. I mean, they're product placement.
Yeah.
Effectively.
We don't do that. No, we're an independent podcast.
No, we are very independent. This segment's not sponsored by GIF. But no, anyway, I told you I'd go down a rabbit hole.
Yeah.
But out of the Journal of Cognitive Neuroscience, there's this weird article which I went, wow, this is kind of cool. And there's a number of authors, and maybe in the show notes we can list them because there's a bunch of them. But one was talking about this. There's this idea that you can listen to, your brain will create these strange sounds for what you're seeing when it comes to a GIF or a GIF, whichever way you want to call it.
GIFs, as we know, are silent, moving images.
Yeah, it's kind of ones you see often in Twitter usually, where it's like, it's a couple of frames of a funny thing.
Yeah. Absolutely. And no sound to it.
Absolutely right. Now, this is the weirdest thing. Now, seriously, go onto Google or your favorite search engine and type in skipping power lines or type in SpongeBob flipping burgers, or there's like one where there's a guy just jumping off a bridge and splashing into water. And here's the thing. Your brain knows what booms and splashes and things like that sound like.
Yeah.
And here's a weird thing. You're watching a silent movie. It's like, going back like nearly whenever the first movies first came out, there's silent movies.
God.
I know what it is.
Early 1900s with that like ragtime music sort of thing.
Yeah, we'll have to get future Duncan onto that because, to be honest, I'm not
fact checking. That's about right.
Yeah, a long time ago. So here's the thing. So there's this. I mean, I must say, firstly, when I thought skipping power lines, what on earth is that? And think of those, those serious high voltage power lines that power like an entire city.
I have seen that one actually. Yeah, I have seen that one.
It's cool. Like, you've got these two frames of a power. If you haven't seen it, you've got these two frames of a power line. The wires are flipping around like a skipping rope, and there's a big power line jumping it.
Doosh, doosh. That's the sound that it makes, right?
And it sounded like that to my brain.
Yeah, it's crazy.
Which meant that I had this weird situation which a number of people have called a visual evoked auditory response.
Oh, I like that.
Yeah, I'm just going to call it VIR. It's too hard.
Okay, so that's what they call it in the article?
Yeah, it is. Visual-evoked auditory response.
Gotcha. Okay.
Got it. So I'm just going to call it VIR. So here's the deal. They found out, and this is actually a research was coming out of the City University of London, where they found out that people with visual ears, this visual evoked auditory response, can use both their senses, their eyes and their ears, to hear silent motion, which freaks me out.
That is weird. So your brain is sort of what's the word that I'm looking for?
Oh, synesthesia.
Yeah, sort of like that.
Sort of.
Yeah.
Yeah,
it's synthesizing the information from two different sources.
And it's kind of strange. So they came across this phenomenon and, hey, like good scientists, let's go check it.
Yeah. Okay.
And so what they did is they played two very specific wavelengths at people's auditory areas and their visual areas.
Different wavelengths as in of sound?
Yeah, like Morse code sequences, which is kind of strange. Like, this is all I got out of the article. I actually have to go in deeper to find out, well, what is it? Is it an electrical stimuli or whatever? Okay.
Yeah.
Not too sure. But you've got these very clear stimuli, so to speak, being plugged at someone's auditory area and their visual area. Now, here's the thing. If people had watched something like, the skipping, I keep on talking about the skipping power lines because, frankly, it's just the weirdest thing I've seen in a while.
It's great, yeah.
But here's the thing. When they found that people who don't respond to the skipping power line to hear the boom, the boom, the boom as this power line jumps up and down, they actually found that when they stimulated the currents into their brain, if it was near their visual center of their brain, it dropped their visual performance but improved their audio performance.
What?
Yeah, it's like you got to get your head around that for a start.
Yeah.
I feel like I have to write this again. So if it's near the visual center of your brain, so think of the back of your head, it's called the occipital lobe, back where you have the visual stuff in your brain.
That's also a wild point, by the way, that the visual center of your brain is at the back of your head, not the front like you'd think it would be.
Which is why if you fall off your chair and you hit the back of your head, you see stars.
Yeah, it's crazy.
Which is just strange. And yeah, don't do that. It's not the greatest experiment.
Don't sue us. I've said this so many times on the podcast. Please don't sue us.
Maybe we should have that. Maybe that should be the name of the podcast. Don't sue us. Anyway,
we're 26 episodes in. I'm not changing it now.
That's right. So we're saying we're twist. So if it was near the visual center of the brain, it dropped the ability to see stuff effectively and improved the ability to hear stuff from a simplistic point of view. Yeah. And if the stimuli was put near the auditory area, so just above your ears, near the parietal lobe, if you want, if the neuroscientists out there, hi to all you neuroscientists, hang on, that's near the temporal area. I don't know. I'm a generalist biologist, but it's there. If they plug the stimuli near the auditory areas of the brain, it improved their visual performance, not their hearing performance.
Gotcha. So it's kind of like for this group of people who don't experience VIR, then it's like their brain can only do one of the things at once and not both.
Pretty much. Now, it kind of sort of opens up the question about, well, how does obviously the brain process stimuli for a start? I mean, that's the point of the experiment. But it sort of makes me think, well, what does this mean for the greater public? Now, the issue with this particular the study, and they do freely acknowledge this, is they did only have a small group of people.
Sample size, yeah.
Yeah, sample
Which
size.
is how many?
50 people.
Okay, for this sort of study, I think you'd need a bit more than that. Yeah,
Yeah, and mind you, though, they're saying that it's still pushing towards a potential this might be a real thing.
Yeah, it's indicative only.
And he was cool about this, and perhaps this is maybe a little bit of a selection of an area. Of those 50 participants, 16 of them were from the London Royal College of Music.
What?
Yep.
That's not by coincidence.
I don't know. I think we'd have to dig deeper on that.
That is weird. Okay, because that introduces obviously some kind of selection bias, effectively, into
that's
the study.
Because what they found, and this is like a more likely, like, when you look in studies, you can always find like more correlations, not as effectively causation, but you see stuff, right? They found that the people that from the London Royal College of Music were more likely to report experiencing VIA than non-musicians anyway.
They were more likely,
yes,
if they're musicians. Okay, cool. That kind of makes sense, I guess, because their brain would be more linked up for auditory stuff. Is that?
Yeah,
is that how you would interpret it?
So that's how I interpret it.
Yeah, if we were to ascribe some sort of causality to it, it might be because of that.
Yeah, it might be. It needs further study.
Yeah, or it could be that people who have their ears linked up better are more likely to be musicians. We don't really know.
Maybe. Rack a bit of maths through it and
exactly.
instant musician.
Let's apply some statistics.
Right.
But then there could be a third one. This is why we don't link correlation with causation.
Exactly right. And that's actually the point. And the thing is, they found that the people who do experience VIA, this visual weird auditory thing that happens with these GIFs, these GIFs, is that it made no difference whether they stimulated the auditory area or the visual area. And therefore it implied that potentially something's going on.
Yeah. And so when you watch the skipping power line thing, do you hear it?
Totally.
Yeah, so do I. But the thing is, I don't think that we can say that, for me anyway, I don't literally hear it, but I experience a sensation of what that sound would be like. Does that make sense?
Yeah, but I actually wonder what would happen if you looked at the GIF. I'm going to keep on going GIF or GIF because I'm freaked out. The GIF. What would happen if you looked at a week and a week after and a week? What about a year after? Would it be the same sound in your head? Would you, like, as your experience changes over time, would you there, add different sound effects to this thing? I'm just wondering.
If you hear other noises that are sort of booming and thumping in that kind of way, would it be replaced with new ones that you've learned?
Would you be accessing a memory area?
Yeah. Because the thing is, like, I hear a big booming, thumping noise, but I'm wondering, like, what booming, thumping noise am I drawing on from my personal experience?
I mean, to me, it sounded like something out of Jurassic Park.
Yeah, with the T-Rex.
Totally. Yep.
And then you can see the glass of water.
They actually, with the glass of water thing, I believe, tell us if we're wrong, of course, but I believe it was like to be able to create that ripple effect in the cup, they had a string put underneath a table or something to that effect, and they plucked it really hard. And it produced enough harmonics, enough vibrations to be able to make it do the ripple effect that was the Jurassic Park.
Steven Spielberg, you've done it again.
Yeah, I mean, there's just an amazing. I mean, these, they struggled for ages until someone said, "What if we just do a string thing?"
Yeah, a string thing.
That's
string
right.
theory.
That's right.
You'd be amazed how many times Jurassic Park has come up on this podcast. Well, you've listened.
Yes.
So you would know so many times. It's like, it just reminds me of the time that the Velociraptors opened the door and stuff like that. And yet here we are again talking about Jurassic Park.
So that's another study to look at.
Yeah. Why? It's like Jurassic Park and Lion King for me. Always, they're top of mind. I don't know why, but there you go. Actually, Jurassic Park was your doing, so I'm not taking that one.
Yeah, I'll take that. But the guest brought it in, and my bad.
Yeah.
But I do want to hear what happens because I know that they're intending on doing a larger study, and it'd be interesting to see what happens. Remains to be seen.
So I think what we should do as well is, with our lovely colleagues here at Fizzics, we should ask everyone, do they hear something?
Well, we can contribute to the study.
Yeah, exactly. Because how many people work here? Oh, my God.
Actually, you know what? Anyone listening in on that, just type in various moving GIFs and go find
ones that
and let us know.
Sounds. Yeah,
maybe we can just feed them and let them know. I mean, I don't know how fair testing we're doing here, but we're providing
it's hardly scientific.
Yes.
That's another good name for the podcast.
Hardly scientific.
Hardly scientific.
We can't spell physics for a start.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. We spell it that way because we think we're funny.
Yeah.
But we're not.
We try.
The other thing that we could do is this would be kind of like the Laurel and Yanny thing.
Yes.
So it's like who falls into what camp.
Yep.
I think Quill, she's not going to hear it. She's not a musical person. Sorry, Quill.
She's sitting somewhere in her bed with a thermometer in her throat.
Yeah.
She nearly choked on the thermometer just then.
So there you go. Very interesting. Thank you, Ben.
Yeah, I found it.
And shall we move on?
Why not?
All right. The last one that I wanted to talk about. This is a great story. This comes from friend of the podcast, Bri the Fly Guy, who isn't really a friend of the podcast, but I hope will be in the future.
Anyone called Bri the Fly Guy probably should be the friend of the podcast.
Absolutely. So Bri the Fly Guy is Dr. Brian Lessard, whose claims to fame, he's basically a research scientist at the CSIRO. One of his claims to fame includes naming a species of fly after Beyonce.
I wonder if Beyonce knows. That's so cool.
I hope so. If not, I'll give her a call and I'll let her know. So, yeah, I found out about this through him because I follow him on Instagram. And the reason that I really like this story is because, as you mentioned before, we like to talk about audio things. We like to talk about music things on this podcast. So previously we've talked about, I think it was on the last episode, we talked about how if you play hip-hop music to cheese, it produces better flavors, which is just insane. It sounds so silly to say out loud, but that is genuinely true. And it also links back to a story that we talked about before about why zebras have their stripes. Okay? And the answer basically for that one was that it stops flies and other insects from landing on them and biting them. So basically, this is all about mosquitoes and how we can possibly lessen the impact of mosquito bites, mosquitoes carrying things like Zika and dengue viruses, which are still massive, massive problems. So they're trying to think, we can use things like insecticides to reduce that and so on. But let's try something a little bit more novel. And these people from, oh my God, which universities? So many universities. It was the University Malaysia Sarawak. There's the Mosquito Research and Control Unit in the Cayman Islands. Fukuoka University in Japan. Oh my God, there's so many. I'm going to put it in the show notes. But they basically figured that if you play these Aedes aegypti mosquitoes, play them music, a specific type of music, then there are major differences in the way that they feed, which is feed on blood, and their mating as well. So they
they
two groups.
Like Barry White is more... if they played something else on...
We want less of that.
Got it. So they didn't do that. Maybe they should do that as a control in an area.
Yeah, exactly.
Right.
Hey, it works for me. No, so what they did, the music that they chose is the fantastic music of Skrillex.
Which is really cool. And I mean, so right. So the idea is to stop breeding, right?
Stop it breeding and from stopping biting, yes.
So because Skrillex doesn't bite...
I think Skrillex just stops breeding generally, to be honest, but...
Right.
So basically, they had this control group where there was no music played to these mosquitoes, and then one where they played a track called Scary Monsters and Nice Sprites by Skrillex. And they noticed that of the mosquitoes that were played Skrillex, they stopped feeding as much, stopped biting, and they stopped... what they call copulation patterns, which is,
So they're seeing these.
Are we allowed to talk about this on this podcast, Ben?
Well, we are scientists. This
Okay,
is a science. This is a research, and I'm just sort of thinking here. So they didn't breed as much. Yep, got it. So they see some numbers that say so, but why?
So they basically think it's because that particular track has a huge mix of low and high frequencies. It's also quite noisy.
Yeah.
As a sort of as a sound, it's very, very noisy. Where, like, if you think of Barry White, he's smooth, baby.
So if we put some, like, thrash metal or something out there...
Which I think we should.
Yeah.
Because, Megadeth all day. But you'd probably find the same effect, right?
Right.
You would, because it is just so harsh. And what happened basically was female adult mosquitoes, it says here, were entertained by the track, Scary Monsters and Nice Sprites, which I think means more distracted than entertained.
Right.
And they attacked the hosts later and less often than those in a dubstep-free environment. And also the occurrence of blood feeding activity was lower when the music was being played.
Interesting. So do you reckon like local councils and whatnot might take this on?
What, just like a PA system?
I'm just putting it amongst the mangroves and wherever else they're turning up.
Yeah. So in the national parks, there's just these huge speakers.
Because you got these issues, of course, because I get we want to control mosquito populations because they do carry disease. I mean, they are a vector. But you got this other issue that if perhaps the local population might like Skrillex, or perhaps they might see it as noise pollution. And
Totally.
You got a problem.
I feel like on some days I'm in one camp and some days I'm in the other. I used to really like that album. It's kind of similar actually to you might have heard about, you know how we talked about this today earlier actually about how kids can hear higher frequencies than adults.
Absolutely.
Because as you grow older, your capacity for hearing those higher frequencies diminishes. People like shopping centers, what they would do is they play really high frequency sine waves to deter teenagers and youths from hanging out in like the car parks.
Because they shouldn't hang out anywhere ever.
No, that'd be
terrible. It would be terrible.
So what they did, they basically like played this really annoying high-pitched tone that only children and teenagers could hear in the hope that they would no longer hang out there. Apparently it works, but so like this is kind of similar.
Right.
In that if you like put a giant PA system, maybe you wouldn't, in the mangroves, maybe you wouldn't play dubstep, but maybe you could play some sort of high-pitched and low-pitched sound, or perhaps just like white noise that humans wouldn't respond to or something like that.
I wonder if there was a correlation, not a causation, but a correlation between the houses that surrounded those shopping centres and dog bites.
Yeah.
Like they're just going nuts because of this sound.
The other funny thing about that, the shopping centres thing, is that because kids are geniuses, they took that and they flipped it and they reversed it. When I was in school, what kids would do was they would take a really high-pitched tone and they'd set it as their text tone. So that way, when their phone went off while they were in class, they knew that they got a text, but the teacher didn't because they never heard it.
So you'd have to adjust it every time you went to a new period. You'd have no choice because, you got the brand new teacher and you got the person who's been teaching for a while.
Yep, right. And you might have the young teachers who are like just out of uni and like, I heard that.
Yeah, exactly right.
Well, they wouldn't say it like that.
And I tell you what, I mean, it does take some cojones, so to speak, to actually go, this is the first time you do it. Like, you'd be really hoping that you got it right.
Yeah, for sure. But I love this idea. I think it's just fantastic that, the thing about Skrillex and this album is that it won 2 Grammys, but it seems like Skrillex is just universally hated. And now we found out that insects hate Skrillex too, which is really, really funny.
Mind you, it's a bit of fun to put through a Rubens tube.
Oh, true.
Yeah, if you never know what a Rubens tube is, so we've got a bunch of these different gas burners, effectively. They're giant ones, and they're like 2 meters long with a whole bunch of holes along them. And if you play different notes, frequencies through these Rubens tubes, you then get different peaks and troughs of waves of fire above the tube. And you play music down it, and Skrillex is one of them that you can just throw down it.
And it would work because it has a mix of really low frequencies and high frequencies, which is exactly why, mosquitoes and people hate it.
Got it. So the only thing it likes is a mechanical device.
Yes, I guess.
No, mind you, hi to all your Skrillex lovers, by the way.
Yeah. Well, like I said, I used to really like Skrillex. I actually once, I don't know if I should tell you this, but I once crashed my car while listening to Skrillex.
Oh, so you've got a bias.
Somewhat, yeah. Maybe it's just I went very anti-Skrillex after that because I was doing some spirited driving. Hello, police, if you're listening.
So it's almost Pavlovian. If the Skrillex is out there, you might crash your car.
Yeah, exactly.
I actually don't mind Skrillex. I mean, like everything, all in small doses.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I re-listened to this song after hearing this, and I was like, that's actually a pretty great track.
Yeah.
Like, the 18-year-old in me is going, yeah.
But not if you're an 80s mosquito.
No, exactly.
Awesome.
All right, should we leave it at that?
Yeah.
All right. Well, that's a wrap on Fizzics Twist for this week. Thanks for joining us, Ben.
Mate, I had a blast.
Yeah, awesome. Now, I didn't think we didn't actually mention this in the intro, but Ben is the director and CEO. Are you both? Do you get both titles?
Some random thing that makes me feel awkward whenever people mention it.
CEO, COO, CFO, all the titles.
Oh, we get a lot of help, though.
Yes, that is true. So I hope you enjoyed that, and see you next week. Bye.
See you later.